I never anticipated becoming the type of woman who would cross an irreversible boundary, yet one evening, my stepson extended a form of assistance that altered the course of my life. Life often provides no warning when you are faced with a decision that will fundamentally alter the course of your narrative, creating a distinct division between what was and what will be. It does not provide a gentle reminder or caution you to exercise care. This is the pivotal moment of transformation. No, it enters subtly and gradually, akin to water seeping through an unnoticed crack. By the time you recognize the consequences of your actions, you find yourself deeply immersed in the situation. My house was silent, yet it lacked a sense of tranquility. The atmosphere was frigid and devoid of life, characterized by a silence so profound that one's own heartbeat emerged as the most prominent sound present. My husband was present, in a physical sense, but emotionally? Not at all. Completed the review. He ceased to observe details years ago. I ceased inquiring about my well-being. Ceased to engage with me. I found myself fading into the background of my own existence. I would prepare dinner, organize the laundry, and tidy up after everyone. I find myself awake at night contemplating my significance. Contemplating whether this is the typical progression of marriage after the initial phase of excitement diminishes. Perhaps that explains why I failed to recognize when changes began to occur. When eyes that were once merely familiar evolved into something deeper, when simple gestures began to resonate as vital connections. I did not actively seek it out. I did not have any plans for it. However, my heart was fatigued. Frustrated with a lack of recognition. Exhausted from maintaining the facade that all is well. Exhausted from encountering a man who remained unresponsive while I expressed my emotions in the kitchen with my back turned. When my stepson truly observed me, looking at me with concern rather than judgment, it had an unexpected impact on me. It revealed something significant. A matter I had long since put to rest. One evening, a singular instance of unforeseen kindness transformed my perception of him. The perspective I held regarding my self-image. I regret that I cannot claim to have prevented it. I regret not having the foresight to withdraw before the situation escalated. However, I did not. I now carry a memory that remains indelible, accompanied by a silence in our home that conveys more than any words could express. The events that transpired between us were subtle. It was not impulsive. The pace was sluggish. Discreet. That is what renders it so haunting. However, I will provide you with all the necessary information. Not due to a sense of pride. However, it is possible that others share the same sentiments I once experienced. It is possible that another individual is positioned at that precipice, unaware of their situation. If you have ever experienced a sense of invisibility within your own home, or long to be acknowledged, listened to, or embraced, even just once, then this narrative may resonate with you more deeply than you realize. If you are still engaged, kindly take a moment to click the like button. Subscribe to the intriguing infidelity saga. If you find any aspect of this resonates with your experiences, particularly if you have navigated a complex situation that prompted significant reflection, please feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. I have reviewed them. I genuinely do. Your narrative has the potential to assist others in feeling less isolated. Allow me to explain how it all commenced. What began as assistance evolved into an unforeseen situation. At the age of 38, with 12 years of marriage behind me, I found myself experiencing a profound sense of loneliness that I had never encountered before. The exterior of our house was aesthetically pleasing, featuring a meticulously maintained lawn, inviting lighting, and a fresh coat of paint. However, internally, it was quite chilly. Not in a physical sense, but rather on an emotional level. A subtle tension permeated the atmosphere, an intangible presence that became palpable the moment one entered the room. The type of silence that does not provide comfort, but rather constricts. My husband was not unkind. He refrained from raising his voice. He abstained from alcohol. He did not engage in dishonest behavior. He simply was not present. At least not in the aspects that were significant to me. He would return home from work, pour himself a drink, and spend hours gazing at his phone or the television. We ceased discussions on topics that were not strictly functional. Invoices. Grocery items. Scheduled meetings. We shared dinner in close proximity, yet it felt as though we were separated by vast distances. It was not always like that. There was a period when he brought me to tears with laughter. When he made contact with my lower back in the kitchen without any particular reason. During the moments when we shared subtle humor and meaningful exchanges that conveyed so much. However, as time passed, that diminished. At some point, I ceased my efforts to reclaim it. I came to the conclusion that this is simply the nature of marriage. However, I long for the feeling of being valued and acknowledged. I longed for recognition. I began to observe a decline in my dressing habits. What was the objective? He failed to observe when I donned a new dress. I did not receive any comments when I applied my makeup. I opted for a darker hair color one weekend, making a bold and distinct choice. He remained silent, did not even give it a second glance. However, a few days later, my stepson did. He had recently returned to the residence. At the age of 21, he faced challenges in adapting to college life, and we extended an offer for him to stay with us temporarily. He exhibited politeness, maintained a reserved demeanor, and consistently showed respect. Reserved, yet attentive. A person of few words, yet when he spoke, his sincerity was unmistakable. Prior to his move-in, we had not dedicated significant time to one another. His mother, my husband's former spouse, held primary custody during the majority of his upbringing, resulting in infrequent visits. Now, he was present in our home, entering the same kitchen where I prepared coffee each morning, inquiring about my sleep. Upon seeing me that morning after I dyed my hair, he paused briefly and inquired, "Did you change something?" The appearance is quite impressive. I blinked. The compliment was neither excessive nor inappropriate. Rather, it was significant because it had been quite some time since anyone had acknowledged any aspect of my presence. I expressed my gratitude with a smile, and he acknowledged it with a nod before continuing with his tasks. No unusual energy, no tension, merely a straightforward, sincere observation. However, it remained with me. He was the sole individual who recognized when I altered my hairstyle, the only one who inquired about my well-being during my headache, and the only one who expressed gratitude when I prepared a meal. I had become unaccustomed to that, and it was not solely due to his words. His manner of speaking and the way he regarded me while I communicated conveyed a sense of significance, as if my words were truly being heard. I cannot recall the last instance when someone regarded me in such a manner, as if my words held significance beyond mere background noise. My husband and I occupied the same bed, yet our sleep resembled that of unfamiliar individuals. There are no good-night kisses, nor any warmth present. The sound of him snoring beside me as I gazed at the ceiling prompted reflections on the extent to which I could endure this lifestyle. I questioned whether this sense of numbness was typical and if this was simply the way life unfolds. Here was this young man residing in the same house, inadvertently serving as a reminder of my continued existence. I attempted to overlook it. I genuinely did. I attempted to dismiss the moments when I found myself looking at him during breakfast. I experienced a subtle flutter in my heart when he inquired about my day. I reassured myself that I was simply appreciative of the kindness, considering it to be innocuous. The previously tolerable emptiness in my marriage, which had become a fixture in our lives, became increasingly intolerable, as I now understood the significance of being seen, spoken to, and acknowledged. Once you experience that level of warmth after enduring years of cold, it becomes challenging to feign disinterest in wanting more. At that moment, I was unaware, but the foundation had already been established. It was inevitable that it would develop into something beyond my ability to manage. At the age of 38, with 12 years of marriage behind me, I found myself experiencing a profound sense of loneliness that I had never encountered before. The exterior of our house was aesthetically pleasing, featuring a meticulously maintained lawn, inviting lighting, and a fresh coat of paint. However, internally, it was quite chilly. Not in a physical sense, but rather on an emotional level. A palpable tension lingered in the atmosphere, an intangible presence that one can sense in their chest upon entering the room. A silence that does not provide comfort, but rather feels oppressive. My husband was not unkind. He refrained from raising his voice. He abstained from alcohol. He did not engage in dishonest behavior. He was absent, particularly in the aspects that were significant to me. He would return home from work, pour himself a drink, and spend hours gazing at his phone or the television. We ceased discussions on topics that were not strictly functional. Invoices, grocery items, scheduled meetings. We shared dinner in close proximity, yet it felt as though we were separated by vast distances. It was not always like this. There was a period when he brought me to tears from laughter, when he made contact with my lower back in the kitchen without any particular reason. During the moments when we shared subtle humor and meaningful exchanges that conveyed so much. However, as time passed, that diminished. At some point, I ceased my efforts to reclaim it. I came to the conclusion that this is simply the nature of marriage. However, I longed for the feeling of being valued and acknowledged. I felt overlooked. I began to observe a decline in my dressing habits. What was the objective? He failed to observe when I donned a new dress. I did not receive any comments when I applied my makeup. I changed my hair color to a darker shade over the weekend. A bold statement. A unique approach. He remained silent. Did not give it a second glance. However, a few days later, my stepson did. He had recently returned to the residence. At the age of 21, he faced challenges in adapting to college life, and we extended an offer for him to stay with us temporarily. He exhibited politeness, maintained a reserved demeanor, and consistently showed respect. Reserved, yet attentive. A person of few words, yet when he spoke, his sincerity was unmistakable. Prior to his move-in, we had not allocated significant time to spend together. His mother, my husband's former partner, held primary custody during the majority of his upbringing, resulting in infrequent visits. Now, he was here, within our home, entering the same kitchen where I prepared coffee each morning, inquiring about my sleep. Upon seeing me that morning after I had dyed my hair, he took a moment to pause and inquired, "Did you change something?" The appearance is quite impressive. I blinked. The compliment was neither excessive nor inappropriate. Rather, it was significant because it had been quite some time since anyone had acknowledged any aspect of my presence. I expressed my gratitude with a smile, and he acknowledged it with a nod before continuing with his tasks. No unusual energy, no tension, just a straightforward, sincere observation. However, it remained with me. He was the sole individual who acknowledged my haircut, the only one who inquired about my well-being during my headache, and the only one who expressed gratitude when I prepared a meal. I had become unaccustomed to that. It was not only the content of his words, but also the manner in which he expressed them, and the way he regarded me during our conversation, as if my thoughts held significance, as if he were genuinely attentive. I cannot recall the last instance when someone regarded me in such a manner, as if my words held significance beyond mere background noise. My husband and I occupied the same bed, yet our sleep resembled that of strangers. There were no affectionate gestures at night, no comforting presence, only the sound of him snoring beside me as I lay awake, contemplating how much longer I could endure this existence, questioning whether this emotional detachment was typical, and if this was simply the way life unfolds. Despite everything, this young man residing in the same house served as an unintentional reminder of my continued existence. I attempted to disregard it. I genuinely did. I attempted to dismiss the moments when I found myself looking at him during breakfast, and the slight flutter in my heart when he inquired about my day. I reassured myself that I was merely appreciative of the kindness, considering it innocuous. However, the subtle void in my marriage, which had become a familiar presence, became intolerable once more, as I now understood the experience of being recognized, engaged with, and validated. Once you experience that level of warmth after enduring years of cold, it becomes challenging to deny your desire for more. At that moment, I was unaware that the seed had already been sown, and it was merely a question of time before it developed into something beyond my control. That evening, I experienced difficulty in sleeping. I remained in the darkness, the house entirely quiet aside from the gentle hum of the refrigerator in the distance and the sporadic creak of the settling wood. My husband lay asleep beside me, turned away, his back rising and falling in a slow, steady rhythm that I had become accustomed to. No one has reached out to inquire about my well-being. No whispered inquiries, "Are you all right?" The silence remains unchanged and unyielding. However, I continuously envisioned him, the manner in which he gazed at me on the couch, the softness in his voice, the warmth reflected in his eyes. I revisited that moment repeatedly. It may be beneficial for someone to provide you with the necessary support. I experienced it once more, akin to a gradual discomfort emerging in my chest, a warmth that had been absent for an extended period. It surprised me. I made an effort to dismiss the thought, reminding myself that he was my stepson. However, the term stepson felt unusual at that moment, as if it did not accurately represent his role in my life. I was not engaging in any form of fantasy. I had no plans in place. I found it impossible to overlook the impact he had on my emotions. It was at that moment that the feelings of guilt began to emerge. Was I truly this in need of affection? Was my heart truly so devoid of substance that a single act of kindness could affect me in such a profound manner? I positioned myself on my side, directing my gaze away from my husband, with my eyes wide open in the darkness. I reflected on the most recent occasion when he reached out to me for closeness, the last time he inquired about my well-being without anticipating a list of tasks in response, and the last moment we shared laughter together. It had been several years. The laughter we once shared, which would effortlessly arise over the simplest of moments, has gradually diminished without my realization. It wasn't until another person brought a smile to my face that I became aware of its absence. It seemed as though there were two distinct aspects of my identity, one that was vibrant, playful, and expressive, and another that lay in that bed, stagnant and diminished by the monotony of daily life and a lack of self-care. I appreciated the moments when my husband would quietly approach me at the sink and kiss my neck. I once felt a sense of beauty simply because he expressed it, regardless of my lack of makeup and disheveled hair. We would engage in slow dancing in the kitchen at midnight without any particular reason. However, I find it difficult to recall the last occasion when he regarded me as someone deserving of his attention. I began to contemplate questions I had never anticipated addressing. Is it truly inappropriate to desire to experience emotions once more? Is it truly so unacceptable to desire recognition, attention, and acknowledgement? I continued to reassure myself that nothing significant had occurred. It was merely a brief instance, an ephemeral sensation. I did not take action on it. I maintained appropriate boundaries. He was an adult, fully grown and mature, capable of understanding boundaries and articulating his own thoughts. I did not intend to entice him. I had no specific intentions in mind. I was simply appreciating the recognition. I conveyed that to myself. I was simply appreciating the recognition. However, I understood that the situation was more complex, as it extended beyond merely seeking recognition. The focus was on achieving understanding. For the first time in a considerable period, I experienced the sensation of being truly acknowledged, not merely in the roles of a wife or stepmother, but as an individual in my own right. I began to observe my own behavior in his presence, noting my movements and speech patterns. I found it unfortunate that I was conscious of the situation, yet I felt powerless to change it. The manner in which my voice softened, the way I tucked my hair behind my ear upon his entrance into the room. I became aware of it, and I regretted that awareness, yet I continued nonetheless. A dormant feeling within me, once quiet and long overlooked, was beginning to resurface, demanding my attention. The underlying issue was not centered on him. The focus was on my needs, the aspects I had suppressed for years, what was lacking in my home environment, and my feelings regarding the situation. I had already opened the door, although I had not yet proceeded through it. Following that evening on the couch, a change occurred between us, subtle, quiet, yet undeniably present. It was not brought up by either party. We did not discuss the manner in which he assisted me or the way he regarded me, yet from that moment forward, everything felt distinct. We began to allocate more time to each other, initially in a spontaneous manner. I would prepare dinner while he sat at the counter discussing his classes, expressing his frustrations, and sharing the challenges he faced in adjusting after leaving campus. He expressed a sense of not belonging, as if he were suspended between two phases of his existence, one that had not succeeded and another that remained undefined. I recognized the sentiment more than I was willing to acknowledge. I engaged in conversation, and as I shared aspects of my own restlessness, he demonstrated attentive listening, creating an atmosphere that felt natural and comfortable. It appeared straightforward. On numerous occasions, my husband returned home late or sometimes did not return at all. Business travel has begun to increase in frequency. Dinners became quiet, solitary occasions for me until I began preparing meals for two, and he began to arrive uninvited. It evolved into our discreet routine. I would prepare something from scratch. He would assist in arranging the table. We would engage in conversation, and at times, we would simply sit in silence. However, it was not the awkward silence. Rather, it was a comfortable one, where the need for words diminished, as the mere presence of each other sufficed. Then came the evening that deepened our connection. My husband departed for a 3-day business trip. I refrained from inquiring this time. I ceased inquiring some time ago. I was relieved to avoid experiencing the discomfort of his silence during dinner. On that evening, I prepared a straightforward pasta dish. He proposed selecting a film that would be light-hearted and humorous. We positioned ourselves on opposite ends of the couch, as was our customary practice. There was a gap between us, yet it did not convey a sense of separation. As the film progressed, we simultaneously extended our hands toward the popcorn bowl. My hand lightly made contact with his, not forcefully or with intention, yet we remained in close proximity for a moment longer. I experienced a sudden sensation, a subtle energy that traveled up my arm with a gentle touch. Our eyes connected momentarily before we both averted our gaze and shared a soft, awkward laugh, yet that laughter resonated in the air. The film continued to run, yet I scarcely absorbed the remainder of it. Following that moment, we remained silent, yet we positioned ourselves closer together. I positioned my legs beneath me. I adjusted my body slightly to face him. His gaze occasionally shifted in my direction. Upon its conclusion, he rose, stretched, expressed his gratitude for the dinner, and proceeded to his room. I remained seated long after the credits concluded, fixated on the screen, my heart racing more than it ought to have been. On that particular night, I experienced a dream. I cannot recall the initial circumstances, yet the emotions associated with it remain vivid in my memory. His hands moved gently along my spine, while his lips lightly grazed the side of my neck, hesitant yet inviting, and I found myself not wanting to halt his advance, yearning for more, desiring deeper connection. In the dream, there was an absence of guilt, no second-guessing, only warmth, connection, and a sense of safety. I awoke abruptly, feeling warmth on my skin and experiencing shallow breaths. For a brief moment, I experienced confusion and disorientation. I find myself still entwined in the emotions of that dream, my thoughts racing with a mix of regret and desire. I sat upright, placing my hand on my chest as if that would help to soothe it. What was occurring to me? How could something so seemingly insignificant, merely kindness and presence, evolve into this? I rose, donned my robe, and proceeded silently to the kitchen, seeking hydration and a diversion. He was present in the kitchen, preparing breakfast. Similar to the dream, the storm approached gradually and with significant weight. The sky had been rumbling throughout the evening, producing a low, distant thunder that conveys a sense of caution rather than mere noise. Flashes of lightning illuminated the living room intermittently through the windows. The atmosphere was dense, suggesting an impending change, though I was uncertain whether it originated from the external environment or within myself. My husband has departed once more for another overnight business trip. Another rationale I did not challenge. I was seated on the couch with a blanket, appearing to read, but in reality, I was listening, anticipating, and hoping he might emerge from his room as he had done the night of the movie. We might engage in conversation, or perhaps it would be unnecessary. Perhaps the silence will suffice once more. Subsequently, all visibility was lost. A sudden loud pop echoed in the distance, and in an instant, the house was enveloped in complete darkness, a profound absence of light that seemed to draw everything into its depths. I remained still for a moment, my heart pounding against my ribs. Subsequently, I detected footsteps approaching down the hallway, measured and composed. He inquired gently, "Are you all right?" I acknowledged the statement, only to realize he likely could not perceive my gesture. "It appears that there is a power outage." He entered the room with a flashlight in hand. The beam struck my face, prompting me to flinch and shield my eyes. He expressed a light-hearted laugh, apologizing. He momentarily left the room and returned shortly thereafter with a pair of candles. He ignited each candle individually, arranging them strategically throughout the room. The gentle, flickering illumination transformed the environment, imparting a softer, warmer quality, as if we were no longer in the same residence. He took a seat next to me, rather than at the far end as he typically does. This time, he positioned himself closer, maintaining a respectful distance yet near enough for me to sense his warmth. We shared a moment of silence, attuned to the sound of rain gently tapping on the windows, while the wind pressed against the house as if seeking entry. He then remarked softly that he used to dislike storms during his childhood. I inquired of him, "Why is that?" He gazed at the candle flame, avoiding my eyes, as a sense of chaos enveloped the moment, suggesting that anything could go awry at any instant, leaving one feeling powerless to intervene. I acknowledged that I would take care of it. He directed his gaze towards me at that moment, truly observing me. Have you ever experienced that sensation even in the absence of a storm? The words were stifled in my throat. I averted my gaze, yet not swiftly enough to conceal the response reflected in my eyes. Indeed, I conveyed in a hushed tone, consistently. We remained seated, the storm intensifying, with shadows flickering across the walls. I sensed it developing, not merely the weather, but an additional element, something escalating between us, something that had been subtly brewing for weeks, anticipating the appropriate moment to emerge. He adjusted his position, directing his attention toward me. There is a noticeable lack of self-disclosure in your conversations. I offered a faint smile, with little to express. I find that hard to accept. I observed the candle positioned before us. I once experienced a sense of recognition, desire, and significance. He refrained from interrupting and allowed me to express my thoughts. I currently perceive myself as a constant presence in another person's life, existing in the background without being truly acknowledged. The silence lingered once more, yet this instance felt distinct. He extended his hand deliberately, with care, and gently moved a strand of hair away from my face. It was subtle, nearly tentative, yet it elicited a shiver along my spine. I remained still, I held my breath. His fingers hovered close to my cheek. My heart raced, yet I felt immobilized, not due to fear, but because of the significance of the moment and all it entailed. He regarded me, his voice scarcely rising above a whisper. "It is not right for you to experience such isolation." Before I had the opportunity to articulate my thoughts, before I could recall all the reasons this was not feasible, I leaned in. Minimal, yet sufficient. He met me at that location. The kiss was gentle and unhurried, embodying unspoken sentiments shared between us. It was a blend of solace and discomfort, the subdued urgency of two individuals who had endured an extended period of feigning contentment. I initiated the withdrawal first. Neither I nor he made any statements. We remained seated, inhaling deeply, gazing ahead, uncertain of what would follow. In that moment, everything came to a halt. What actions had I taken? The following morning, the silence that enveloped us conveyed more than any words could express. I awoke early, my body rigid from the position in which I had fallen asleep on the couch, still enveloped in the same blanket, with a subtle aroma of candles lingering in the atmosphere. The power has been restored. The sound of the refrigerator has resumed. The external environment had returned to a state of tranquility, as if the previous turmoil had never occurred. However, internally, the situation was entirely distinct. I noticed him in the kitchen, the recognizable sound of a spoon against a mug, the gentle movement of his feet on the tile. However, this time, there were no words. "Good morning." There was a lack of eye contact upon my arrival. He maintained his posture, pouring coffee as if it were an ordinary day, as if nothing had transpired, as if his lips had not just met mine hours earlier. I also took the same action. I walked past him, picked up a banana I had no intention of eating, and peeled it merely to occupy my hands. My heart raced within me, yet my expression remained composed. I acquired the skill of wearing masks quite some time ago. There was no communication between us. It was unnecessary for us to do so. We were both engaging in pretense, attempting to reverse a situation that was irrevocable. In the later hours of the afternoon, my husband returned home. The suitcase made a muted impact as it struck the floor. He brushed his lips against the top of my head as he walked by, reminiscent of a casual greeting exchanged between colleagues rather than a gesture shared between spouses. He inquired about available food options and promptly proceeded to the kitchen without awaiting a response. He failed to recognize that something was amiss. He did not follow through. However, I did. All components were dislodged. My stepson was reserved. Increased frequency. He remained in his room for the majority of the day, and when he finally emerged, it was solely to depart. He indicated that he required some fresh air and mentioned that he was scheduled to meet a friend. He hardly acknowledged my presence as he exited the room. I experienced a sense of illness. Not merely guilty, but unwell. A profound, unsettling sensation that originates in the stomach and radiates throughout the entire body. I found myself continuously reflecting on that moment. The gentle quality of it. The manner in which I initially leaned in. The manner in which he engaged with me collaboratively. The expression in his eyes afterward conveyed confusion and uncertainty. It seemed as though he lacked confidence in the events that had just transpired. I wished to engage in a conversation with him. To inquire about his well-being. I would like to clarify that my judgment was not clear at that time. The storm, the darkness, and the years of solitude converged simultaneously. However, I did not. I remained silent. I completed the task of folding laundry, cleaned counters that were already in satisfactory condition, prepared meals that went unacknowledged. Throughout the entire time, that moment replayed in my mind like a persistent echo. During dinner that evening, we arranged ourselves as we typically do. My husband sits across from me, engaged with his phone as he takes bites of his meal. My stepson sat quietly, maneuvering his food around the plate. I found myself maintaining a facade while internally struggling with each passing moment. While chewing a bite of chicken, my husband remarked, "I believe he has been somewhat distant lately. It is possible that something is troubling him." I nearly dropped my fork. I raised my gaze, striving to maintain a steady tone in my voice. "He has numerous responsibilities to manage at the moment. It is likely a result of stress." My stepson remained silent. He remained completely composed. He rose a few minutes later, muttered something regarding his departure, and exited the premises. I observed him as he proceeded down the hallway, and I noted the sound of the front door closing behind him. I remained seated, grasping a glass of water that I had yet to drink, gazing into it as if it contained the solutions I was unable to uncover. It was unclear whether he felt regret, resentment towards me for allowing it to occur, or if he was equally disoriented in the aftermath as I was. What I understood was that everything had transformed, and returning to the past was not an option. Certain nights exhibit a tranquility that transcends mere sound, characterized by a notable absence of presence and weight. That evening, it was silent in a manner that evokes a sense of isolation, as if the entire world had abandoned you. A silence that provides no tranquility, merely an opportunity for contemplation and descent into thought. I found myself seated alone in the living room, the lights dimmed, positioned in the corner of the couch as if attempting to blend into it. My husband retired for the night several hours ago. He did not inquire about my whereabouts, did not seek me out, nor did he acknowledge me as he walked down the hall. I was genuinely pleased. I was uncertain about what my response would have been had he done so, due to various factors.